Great, and thank you for coming. It's always scary to be the speaker after lunch because you're not sure if people are going to be awake or if they're going to have, wandered off campus. So thank you for coming, first of all, and thank you for indulging me. We're going to be working in teams, and so that's why I have you sitting like this. I have in the past with students done this in large classrooms where I want them together by using that yellow tape, the caution, danger, do not enter. And they always find that interesting but intimidating enough that they don't cross the line. So this is a very good thing. So our topic this afternoon, encouraging Christian eloquence. There is a paper at the back there that you can take on the way out, and I'm not going to get through the whole thing in about 20 minutes, but we'll touch on some topics and hopefully you walk away with some ideas and a chance for your lasagna to also digest just a little bit. So, can I ask you please, just to get started, with the folks that are in your row, and if you need another package, that's okay. But there should be a little Ziploc baggie. And inside that, and Dennis, I don't know if you want to scoot over there.
Are you joining or are you just going to...
Absolutely, he's going to join in. Inside your packet, you've got 5 cards, 5 yellow cards just put together with a paper clip. Can you please, with the folks just in your area there, in your row, take a look. Here's our first question. It's a multiple choice question. What is Christian eloquence? And have a quick discussion with the folks right near you. And when you come to a group decision, hold up the card that matches your group's response, A, B, C, D, or E. So sort of multiple choice, but as a group. And I'll give you about 1 minute to do that. Okay, let's see your cards. Every group needs to vote. Go ahead and hold your cards up in the air. That's a blank.
Yeah.
That's not quite, okay, I guess that is very creative. All right, correct answer to this one is in fact E. It is all of the above. And when we look at defining it, and this comes from my own work, so certainly all of those attributes that we just saw in the first chunk there, but essentially we're looking at the dynamic interplay of the art of gracious and respectful listening with the art of intelligent and informed persuasion. Christian eloquence requires practice in our capacities to listen deeply and profoundly in order to become more Christ-like, allowing us to open up pathways to the core of what another is saying in the context of a culturally and religiously pluralistic society. So all of these certainly fall under that same category. And in the paper there's a fuller explanation that certainly takes a look at all of these. But in doing this first activity as a group, doing this quick multiple choice, this is one of the first strategies for starting to engage our students in developing Christian eloquence, because in order to do that you have to participate. And one of the perennial challenges of being a post-secondary teacher, of course, is getting students to stop texting under the table and doing all of those other things that we know darn well they do. So this is something that requires them to work together. There's a safety in that, but there is also the requirement of a visible sign, even if it's a blank card, to say, I don't really know what you're talking about. The fact is that there's discussion going on, and that's what starts to open up the pathways. So why would we bother doing this? Certainly at Concordia, our mission statement that Jonathan Strand went over last night, I think very clearly speaks to the importance of Christian eloquence, the whole concept of scholarship, freedom, Christian faith, being thinkers, being ethical leaders, being servants, and moving towards becoming citizens for the common good. Ultimately, we want our students to be able to make a positive contribution to the world, and from a Christian perspective, we want them also to be thinking about their faith and how that's integrated into their lives, certainly as students, but also as they go out into the work world and they take on more adult responsibilities. How is that going to be reflected? As well, we know certainly the Christian church has a role to play in the whole business of bringing about moral clarity. Now, definitely the Christian church has particular perspectives and slants and so on and so forth. But the world is a complex place and it's a confusing place. And we have, I think, in the 20th century, certainly seen a great deal of corruption going on. We've seen poverty, we've seen greater extremes in terms of exploitation, and certainly having the globalized market economy, although it does bring about opportunities for more social justice and for human rights, we've also experienced through the globalized market economy real exploitation of people. And so that's something for us to be concerned about. Environmental issues is another one. If the church remains silent, if we don't have a voice, if we don't speak up, then the secular world can also interpret that as the legitimation of injustice. If we don't care enough to say something about it, then that really actually, through our silence, is a kind of a support. And I don't think that's where the church wants to be. However, the problem is that when we go to issues of, for example, social justice, we know what they are from a secular perspective, but being able to argue from a theological standpoint can be a real challenge. And yet, if we're going to have a collective and commanding voice that people will listen to, we really have to be knowledgeable from both sides of the fence, the secular as well as from the theological. And I think Philip Kennedy really had quite a lot to say about this in a 2010 textbook, and he talked about the 20th century and the increases in terms of poverty and degradation, issues around corruption, for example, all happening within the context of great affluence and wealth. So we've had this growing disparity in the world, and while the Bible itself doesn't come out and say there's anything wrong per se with wealth or affluence, it has a lot to say about the inequities and the inequities of power, and how for us in the Western world often wealth and power go together. And his last statement on here, the story of the 20th century theology, is at least a tale of gradual awakening from a cozy Christian indifference to poverty. And so as we move into the 21st century, there is a real imperative for the church to have something to say. But again, it needs to be knowledgeable from both the theological and the secular in order to have any kind of impact. And William Temple, and I was actually quite pleased to see him referenced in last night's presentation, he was the Archbishop of Canterbury in 1942, just for a short period of time. Unfortunately, he was killed in an accident while he was in office. But he was a huge promoter of social justice. And he came out with a statement in response to the question, what right has the church to interfere? The claim of the Christian church to make its voice heard in matters of politics and economics is widely resented, even by those who are Christian in personal belief and in devotional practice. It is commonly assumed that religion is one department of life, like art or science, and that it is playing the part of a busybody when it lays down principles for the guidance of other departments, whether art or science or business or politics. When a group of bishops attempted to bring government, coal owners and miners together in a solution to the disastrous coal strike of 1926, Mr. Baldwin, then Prime Minister, asked how the bishops would like it if he referred to the Iron and Steel Federation and the revision of the Athanasian Creed, and this was acclaimed as a legitimate score. So the world does not always enjoy our interference, and it doesn't always appreciate our voice, and yet I think that's still not a good reason not to enter into that kind of debate. The other issue, and I've alluded to this, look at the work of John Lovett, and he was talking about why Christians often are not successful in convincing other people in terms of arguments around social justice, environmental justice, economic justice. And he had this to say: once the discussion reaches any depth or detail, confusion and bewilderment result because those arguing from a Christian standpoint have no proper theology to work from. And I know even for myself, there have been times I've engaged in debate with people, but I haven't been theologically prepared to really make a good argument other than it's the right thing to do. And I realize there has to be much more to the conversation in order for that to have any kind of robustness, and if we are in fact going to have any voice that is persuasive. So, with our students, we have this great opportunity for them to get an education, but at the same time to be able to get at this layer of the theological. Part of the issue of eloquence, though, is getting them engaged, getting them actively participating, and getting them talking. And so our first strategy there, which is described also in the paper, is one way of doing that. Once we get them talking, once we get them comfortable and thinking, and this I think is also the key, the conversation becomes a visible sign of what's going on between their ears. And I've often thought if I had a magical can opener and I could open up the tops of their heads, or if they were cartoon characters with bubbles over their heads, then I would have a chance to really find out what they think. But in the absence of that, there are other ways we have to get at this. So we're going to take a look at just a couple of strategies to get us going, and I'm not sure we'll get through all of these, but that's okay. In your packages, you have some sheets that look like this. Christian eloquence, true and false. Okay. Can you make sure each person in your group gets one of these? And could I ask you, please, to not put your name on it? This is really important. Don't put your name on, and just as an individual, can you please fill this out? We're not going to take a lot of time. There's only 4 questions. We'll take about 3 minutes. All right. Can I ask you, please, to take your paper and scrunch it up to about the size of a snowball. And I'm going to give you 30 seconds. Your task is to lob your snowball around our area here, and if one lands near you, pick it up and lob again, and at 30 seconds I'll call time.
She gave us a little essay.
All right, time. Can you please make sure you have a paper? And there might be some on the floor.
Hey, it's mine.
Don't tell us that. Yes, please. Can you open them up and just flatten them out so you can see? And yes, you may, sorry Dale, you can take the tape down to get inside there. That's okay, based on what you have in front of you, not your opinion, and this is why I asked you to make sure that your sheet was anonymous, don't put your name on it. When you want to get students exploring a topic initially, or you want to find out their opinion on something, but you want to do it in a way that's very safe and we can get a collective gauge of the class. This is a great activity, and it also gets them up and moving around. So let's take a look. What does the group think here? Number 1, Christian eloquence refers to the dynamic interplay of the art of gracious and respectful listening with the art of intelligent and informed persuasion. How many people have true for that? False? Okay. All right, and what we're doing here is just taking a gauge, okay? Christian eloquence requires us to enter into dialogic exchange in order to seek truth and create understanding. True?
Sorry, would you put it on the board because I didn't see what they said in the was there any false or true or what?
Oh, I see what you mean. Okay, for the first question, we had the majority saying true, but we had one person saying false. Okay, so for the second one, sorry, true? Okay, false. All right, so we were unanimous on that. Number 3, Christian eloquence is fundamental to the baptismal charge to have an inquiring and discerning heart. True? False? Okay, and here's where we've got some difference of opinion, and this is a great question for starting to look at people's differences of ideas. Now, at this point, we're not going to do that because we're, again, just gauging to see what's the lay of the land as a group. But for those people who had said false, it's kind of comforting to look around and see there are other people that disagree. And that's great because that's grist for the next level, looking at why people would have differences of opinions on these. And our last one, Christian eloquence involves the development of critical thinking and ethical reasoning. True? False? Okay, and again, we've got some difference there. So that strategy, again, to introduce a topic, to get students thinking about something new, should take maybe just 1 or 2 minutes to do, and then it's the follow-up discussion that I think is really important. Okay, so that's one strategy. Next one, I'm actually going to bump up just one here just to do this a little differently. In your package, you also have these half sheets of paper. And there's one for each person in your group again. Oh, here. May I take that back? Thank you. Okay. Part of Christian eloquence is getting our students to think from both the secular and the theological, or from the secular and the sacred worlds at the same time. And recognizing that there can be a difference when you put one lens on, there can be a difference when you put on the second. And so these questions are ones just as a starter to get students thinking about this. So we'll take a look here at the first question. What makes an issue a hot topic? First of all, from a secular perspective, and then secondly, from the sacred perspective. They might be the same, but in your opinion, what do you think?
You're asking us?
I'm just going to ask you to think first. Okay. As an alternative to asking people to put up hands now to respond to that, this is where the popsicle sticks come in handy. Okay, so we have everybody's name in here, and the names are all pointed down, and this is really important because you don't want students to think that you're intentionally picking on them. Now you can do a variation of this. Sometimes I use, in a larger class, I have a coffee can, and I put all the students' names in there, and everybody knows it's in there. But I have, from time to time, when I've had very reticent students, that is the student who likes to text a lot and things like that, you can put a smaller container, like a juice container or a small coffee cup like this in the center, and put their names, their sticks in there. And so while it appears that it's actually just chance, there is a greater chance. Now, we don't do this ever to be punitive to students, and it's really important to ask the question first and then pause. Then I'm going to select a name, and then somebody hopefully will respond, and then we'll build on that person's response from there. And Dylan William calls this strategy pose, pause, pounce, bounce. And we'll try it out to see. Now, if I pull your name out and you really don't have anything to say, or you don't know, or you want to have a lifeline, you want to ask someone else, that's all perfectly legitimate, because again, the goal is to create a safe environment for people to contribute. So we don't ever want to use a question to hang people out to dry. But let's just give this a go here. Okay, so our first question, what makes an issue a hot topic? First of all, from a secular lens. And, Anna Street.
Oh. Well, I would say we look to the media to choose those hot topics. And if you look at the title of Time magazine or any of the reviews, I think that it's cyclical. For a while it'll be, drugs, another time it'll be homosexuality, another time, So they create that, and then we all get interested in that for a while, and then we go on to something else. I think the media creates these. And I think that we're sort of slaves to that.
Okay, great. Let's see. Wackhart, do you have anything to add to what Anna had to say, or another thought that would extend that?
Yeah, I think like some politics or some politics are hot issues or hot
Oh.
because we read newspapers for politics, political news, and on second, maybe some new finding about some maybe some ancient script or something.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Thank you. And so, you know, there's just one example of how we can make this work. And you can just keep going for as many sticks as you have. Or if you want to get really tricky, you can just put them back each time they answer. And then they know they're not off the hook. But the key here is that everyone's listening to the question. Everyone knows there's a possibility that they are going to get called on. And truly, if they have nothing to say, you know, if I had called on Gary and he said, I don't know, then again, the key here is to extend him a lifeline and say, well, you can ask someone else, or does anyone have a thought they want to contribute? And then it's really important after that I would go back to Gary, and after someone has responded, perhaps Anna or Wackhart, and say, Gary, how does that sound to you? Okay, and then he's got an opportunity again to join back in. So it's all about really safeguarding people's dignity and making sure that it's a comfortable place to respond, and never hanging people out to dry. Now I could say that about Gary because I'm sure he would have something to say, and so that's.
Yes, shall I start?
Well, we only have a couple minutes left, so but see me at coffee. All right, and I know our time is getting short, so I'm going to skip the next one, and I'm just going to go straight to the exit pass, and then we'll have a moment for conversation. One of the times I think that we sometimes can miss for additional conversation is at the end of class or near the end of class, and students are already starting to pack up their books, they're taking out their phones again, right? And they're thinking about coffee or meeting their friends, whatever it is. But having a question, and in this case I've printed it and just put it on the slip for you, and again there's one for each person in your team. But having students respond to a question at the end of class and saving the last 2 or 3 minutes for them to jot down their response. Now this is one where I do ask them to put their names on it. Okay, this is a way for me to gauge if they understood the concept I was looking at. B, if they have a particular opinion on something, if they have a question. And then what I do is take that information away, read it over, and then look at ways of structuring the next activity and discussion. So perhaps this one, the question here, how might you encourage Christian eloquence in your own context? Perhaps it is when these slips come back at the end of the day that I see that Wendy and Tina and Zoltan, well, let's say this entire group up front here, Caroline and Bridget and Tina and Zoltan, all have a similar interest, or they have a similar context they're working from. I might start the next class with a question or an activity that groups them together so they have something similar to talk about. It may be, if I've asked a question or an opinion, that I'm going to structure groups that have very different opinions. So it might be that Dale and Catherine and Darren really have very divergent opinions on the topic, but I want them to talk about it. And so I will group them together. So this becomes a way for me as the instructor to figure out what are the next steps, but also in terms of continuing the conversation and making sure there's opportunities to discuss as the big group, but also that we have these smaller, more concentrated groups.